speech, as I did, my speech with all my props is all about wine. And then you open the programme and you find your speech is on Every Cloud Has a Silver Lining. So you're going to get a rehash of a previous speech called Every Cloud Has a Silver Lining. And I'm going to talk to you about three things which I hold dear. Imagine the umbrella here and think of what Steve Jobs said at the end of his life. He said, it's not until the end of your life that you can see how the dots join up. And that's when you can see how what you thought was a disaster was actually going to do you good in the long run. And I'm going to tell you about Muhammad Ali. He was the greatest, and he gave the greatest speeches. I'm going to talk to you about my Uncle Ronnie, who was colourblind and a deaf musician. And I'm going to talk to you about speech disasters and about real disasters and about losing your business. Well, let's get going. Muhammad Ali. I remember when I was in America and my son was about 7 years old, we bought him a bicycle for his birthday. And what happened to that bicycle? Well, of course he didn't put it somewhere safe, he just flung it on the ground, and we went downstairs afterwards and the bicycle had gone. It had been stolen and it had been wrecked, and we weren't insured. End of bicycle. I thought of that when I heard about the life of Muhammad Ali. How many of you know the story of Muhammad Ali and his bicycle? One person, two people. For the rest of you, it will all be a wonderful surprise. Muhammad Ali was about 11 years old and his bicycle was stolen. And he went and told the policeman and he said, I think I know who took it. And the policeman said to him, when you go and try and get it back, they might attack you. Make sure you can defend yourself. And Muhammad Ali was a little kid, and he thought, I need to go and do some lessons. So he went and took up boxing. And he went and he took it up because he was determined to get his bicycle back. And you know the end of the story. He ended up being the world-famous boxer, the man who the whole world was celebrating in every country of the world, and he gave the greatest speeches. He said, I'm the greatest. Even if he'd lost all his fights, he would have still been famous because of his speeches. And what do you remember? I can't do boxing. I'm not black. I'm not a man. But he resonates with me because I remember I'm the greatest. I will now move on from there. I hope it's not a solecism to make a jump like that. To my beloved uncle. I remember at the end of his life, I went to talk to him and I asked him, and I sat down and I made notes on the whole of his life. I was planning that one day I would write his life story and I would put it in a book, and of course one day I was hoping I would survive him and give his funeral speech. And he told me about how in the war, World War II, he wanted to be a pilot and he was not allowed to be a pilot. And this was his biggest upset. He wasn't able to be a pilot. His friends were pilots. He wasn't a pilot. What happened to all his friends who were pilots? They all died. My uncle, who was this sort of pessimistic man, didn't see it that way. He saw it that he was deprived of the opportunity to be a pilot. But I saw it as the reason why he'd lived such a long life. And I saw him sitting in bed with his poor eyesight, reading a newspaper. And I asked what he was reading. He was reading obituaries of all his friends who'd died before him. And that really brought it home to me that what he had thought was a disadvantage. And I can imagine my grandmother, when she discovered her son was colourblind, would have been distraught and never realised until World War II that it was going to save his life. So at the end of his life, like Muhammad Ali, you can look back on that disaster and see that it actually contributed to your life. Now, speech disasters. We've talked about speeches, speech successes, and my speech disaster, how I had this lovely speech prepared and I've had to give you a different speech. Let's talk about some very serious things. I'm sorry to end on a relatively sad note. Something happened this week which upset a lot of us. A lot of people were killed in Florida. And then, the absolute surprise, a couple of weeks later, we discovered that the man who'd been going and sussing out that joint to put his bomb there had been to another club which had 300 people who would all have been killed if he'd gone there. It was nearer his home. And the man who owned that club was absolutely chilled. He said it could have been me. He was looking at my business. And why wasn't it his business? Because his business had closed down. Can you imagine how he felt when his business closed down? He must have thought that was the worst thing which could have happened to him. It wasn't the worst thing which could have happened. It was the thing that saved him and every person in his club. Every cloud has a silver lining.